It came to pass that our ancestors came up from the four worlds below. Our ancestors emerged in a place called Hanslapinkia. They came to Hanslapinkia and settled there. The twin war gods led them. They scouted ahead to where they wanted to go. They came to a place where there was steam coming out of the ground.
As children growing up, we were told stories. Words are sacred to a child. We have grandmothers and grandfathers who instructed us, who taught us, who gave us words. They are the elders of our communities, of our villages, of our homes. We grew up with elders always around us. And then one day, it's our turn. And we have children all around us, hungry for words, hungry for stories. But what do we tell them? What do we say to them? Maybe we tell them how the word first came into being. That listening is the very first step toward making that discovery. That everything is connected to a movement, to a life-giving force set in motion by that first breath begun so long ago. Maybe we point to a piece of landscape, a mountain, a mesa, a river, to a real place on earth. And we tell them how we're connected, how we're rooted to the earth. And then maybe we tell them how a person is always growing, how we are blessed, how we can grow one with our elders by watching them, by learning, and how we can grow by becoming one with their word. Elders tell us, accept life, your life, all of it. That despite all the obstacles, celebrate life with joy and happiness. Celebrate that life-giving force, that sacredness. And then give back. Give back life by sharing. Sharing everything that's been given to you. Elders say, that's the continuum. That's the order of things that we as human beings live by. And it's simple. They say, we've held on to it because it works.
To understand the impact of the Spanish invasion of the Pueblos, we must look at what Pueblo life was like before the first European contacts. Our high civilization can be traced back for at least 2,000 years. The works of our forefathers can be seen in the magnificent structures at Chaco Canyon, Mesa Verde, Aztec, and hundreds of other locations spread throughout New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, and Arizona.
The Pueblo peoples, way back then as now, saw themselves as a part of the earth, as belonging to the earth rather than, the earth belonging to them. They tried their best in every way to blend into the earth, to blend their lives into the surrounding environment where they lived. It's a very sharp difference from European views, which basically postulated a mastery of the earth by mankind and an ownership of the earth by, Christian peoples who came here from Europe.
We have lived upon this land from days beyond history's records, far beyond any living memory, deep into the time of legend. The story of my people and the story of this place are one single story. No man can think of us without thinking of this place.
Pueblo life before contact was mainly spiritual. It was so because the life of the people depended so much on the natural forces. Following the summer solstice, the rainmakers went into the kivas to meditate and fast so that it would rain.
What makes the Pueblo people distinctive is their tenacity, their resiliency, their sheer will to endure as peoples and as free peoples.
On the eve of the first contact with European culture, the Pueblo peoples were a peaceful, highly successful civilization made up of over 100 pueblos, of 50,000 people, speaking 8 sovereign languages, a multitude of differing customs, but one common culture. Indeed, Pueblo civilization would remind the Spanish so much of the high Native American cultures of central Mexico that they would name the territory New Mexico.
Zunis were living in dispersed areas. They were living at Hauiku, the Quechipawa, Matsaaka, Kakima, Pinawa, and a place called Coaquina. And they were living in a fairly dispersed community, living fairly quietly because they were still cultivating their fields, hunting a little bit, and mostly gathering of wild plants and other edible foods from the countryside.
The people who lived at the steaming springs had a giant who led them, who walked ahead of them as their guide. And the people from Hanslapinkia had the twin war gods as their leaders. The Sun Father knew that the giant could not be killed, so when they brought the weapons to the twin war gods, they pierced him with arrows. But the giant wouldn't die. For many years, Pueblo people would hear rumors about white men in the South. But their first contact with European civilization would come at Hauiku at Zuni on an afternoon in May of 1539, less than 50 years after Columbus sailed across the Atlantic. Ironically, the first white man was a black slave from Azamor, Morocco, named Estebanico, who was part of an expedition by Fray Marcos de Niza. The Zuni treated Estebanico like any other spy, locking him and his followers in a large house outside the Pueblo walls. And then one morning in May 1539, Estebanico tried to flee and was killed. According to legend, when the roofs lay over the walls of Kaikima, the black Mexican came and
was killed by our ancients, right where the stones stand at Kaikima.
Were the Zuni people surprised when they saw Estebaneko?
I think they were surprised, but I don't think they were overwhelmed in the fact that trade routes from the Zuni country expanded all over the West and way down into the Pacific and to the Gulf of Mexico. So that I think news of his arrival or news of somebody else that was in the area was probably known. But I don't think they were surprised. But I think what they were surprised at was the fact that he was presenting himself as a representative of the white people who were following him.
Who was Estebaneko?
Estebaneko was a slave. He was a scout for Friar Marcos de Niza, who had sent him ahead to locate and to get information on the 7 cities of gold that they were looking for.
The first contact between the Zunis and the Spaniards. Were the Zunis hospitable? Were they friendly?
The first encounter was probably pretty dramatic in the fact that the Zunis had already heard of or knew of the slave raids of Guzman up into the upper edges of Sonora and northern Mexico, where he killed practically whole villages of older men and women and took only the young people as slaves. And so the information that was available to the Zunis at the time was probably quite scary. And here comes a black man saying that he's the leader of head of the white men that were following him, who were more powerful than he was. He sent this gourd that he had with him, painted red and with red and a white feather and ribbons and bells, as part of the paraphernalia that he sent in as an offering, as an indication of his power. And the war chief probably took the gourd and he dashed it to the ground and said, "This is not from our people."
The younger war god said, "We are now looking for the center place, and there is someone who will not let us pass. They are fighting us, and we are piercing their leader, the giant, with arrows, but he will not die. So I have come up to ask you, Sun Father, if you might know where his heart is." Sun Father said, "His heart is in the gourd rattle that he holds in his hand. The gourd is his heart, and if you destroy it, you will kill him, and your way will be cleared." The younger war god stepped forward from the fighting and shot the gourd rattle. The giant fell, and all his people ran away. They blew the concho shell and made the sound of war. Led by the war gods, the people came and settled in their new homes. They arrived at Hawiku, and this is what happened. This is how we settled at Hawiku.
Estebaneko's death proved to be a tragedy for the Pueblo peoples as well. When Fray Marcos de Niza heard of what happened, he turned around and sped home without visiting the country he called Cibola. His lack of first-hand knowledge did not prevent him from inventing the tale of the 7 cities of gold.
Cibola has the appearance of a very beautiful town. The city is bigger than the city of Mexico, and it is the least of the 7 cities. There is much gold, and the natives trade in vessels and jewels.
Fray Marcos's exaggerations and lies quickly ignited Spanish greed for gold. 1 year later, an expedition led by Francisco Vázquez de Coronado came to Zuni to find the treasure of the 7 cities of Cibola. Coronado brought with him 300 Spanish soldiers, almost 1,000 Mexican Indian allies, guns, crossbows, and warhounds. The Zuni heard rumors of the Spaniards coming and sent their women, children, and elders away from the Pueblo. On July 7th, 1540, hundreds of armed warriors stood before the Pueblo, ready to fight.
fight between the Zunis and the Spaniards, were the Zunis fighting to defend their land, to defend their village?
I don't think that they were necessarily fighting to defend their lands, but I think what they were doing was they were more than upset. They were irate over the fact that the Spanish had interrupted a very important ceremonial event that was occurring right at that time. And if the Spanish had arrived 4 days earlier, 4 days later, they probably wouldn't have had to fight. But the fight was not over land, it was not over possessions, but it was over the rights of the spirituality and the religious ceremonies that was being performed at that particular time.
As the Spanish conquistadors approached Haiku, the Zuni sprinkled a sacred cornmeal line before them and warned them not to cross it.
There is a body of pilgrims out, and until they arrive safely back into Zuni, or into whatever village they were returning to, no one else should cross over that line. When a cornmeal line is drawn between you and some visitors, the visitors should not cross over. It would be inhospitable, presumptuous, in the extreme, to cross a cornmeal line.
The outcome was that the Zunis lost, and the Spaniards came in and took off with the food that they needed, that they badly needed, and then stayed for a few days and sent various groups to the west, to the Grand Canyon, and then continued over to the Rio Grande through Acoma and on to the east.
When the Spaniards first saw the village, which was Cibola, such were the curses that they hurled at Fray Marcos, that I pray God may protect him from them. It is a crowded little village, looking as if it had been all crumpled together.
Against the peaceful Zuni, European military techniques and weapons resulted in a quick victory. But the Spanish were bitterly disappointed. The 7 cities of Cibola had no gold, no precious jewels,